immer ruhigen. A Kind von 3 Uhr bloß, ich darf dich sehen. Wie die Flex mich setzen, damals läuft dein Schuss. Mit a Kisch, abgewischt jede Tür. Weiß dein Kopf, wie Schneebens Fall. Gott, es tut bang, als du bist grün. Mamele, Mamele, sei gebencht von Gott. How you took me on your knee. With a kiss, you dry all my tears. Silver hair, heart of gold. Day by day, I hate to see you growing old. Mamele, Mamele. Gebencht von Gott, sei gebencht von Gott,
Pain and all its parts, who restores all broken hearts, forms darkness and light, creator of peace and strife, who sits on the judgment throne, who forgives, acquits, and dons the long robe of mercy, watches and knows just who will heal my broken heart when I fall apart and I'm lonely like an ocean with no shore. Won't you just tell me who now will embrace me and promise that I will not break down anymore? Who is, was, and will remain, who gives life and obliterates, opens up all hands, wings to fly and feet to land, and who will heal my broken heart shore. Won't you just tell me who now will embrace me and promise that I will not break down anymore? Oh, that I will not break down anymore. With no shore, won't you just tell me who now will embrace me and promise that I will not break down anymore? Oh, that I will not break down anymore.
In our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if I have things you need to borrow. No one can feel those of your needs that you won't let show. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load if you just call me, call me, call me. You need a friend. Call me, call me, call
Asche fragen, sagt mir, wer es kennt. Mit welche Teiere vermegen, bench Gott alle Men. Kauft das nicht für keine Geld, das geht men nur siehst. Und doch als men verliert das oi, wie Tränen men vergisst. Als Zweiten geht man keinem mit, es hilft nicht kein Gewinn. Oh, ich werde es tot verloren. Der weiß schon, was ich mein. A jüdische Mama, es geht nicht besser auf der Welt. A jüdische Mama, oi weh wie bitter, wenn sie fällt. Wie schön und lichtig ist in Haus, wenn die Mama ist da. Wie treurig finster, wenn wird Gott, nehmt mir auf, oi loma bo. Wasser in Feuer, was dir gelaufen war, ihr Kind, nicht halten in Teilen, das ist gewiss die größte sind. Oi, wie glücklich und reich ist der Mensch, was hat, als eine schöne Madonna geschenkt von Gott, nur an altitschke jüdische Mame,
Of things I should be thankful for, I've had my goodly share. And as I sit here in the comfort of my cozy chair, my fancy takes me to a humble east side tenement, 3 flights up in the rear to where my childhood days were spent. It wasn't much like paradise, but mid the dirt and all, there sat the sweetest angel, one that I fondly call my Yiddish mama. I need her more than ever now, my Yiddish mama. I long to kiss that wrinkled brow, I long to hold her hand once more as in days gone by, and ask her to forgive me for the things I did that made her cry. How few were her pleasures, she never cared for fashion style, her jewels and treasures, she found them in her baby smile. Oh, I know that I owe what I am today to that dear little lady so old and gray, to that wonderful Yiddish mama, mama,
If I were a rich man, yeah, don't they, don't they, don't they, don't they, don't they, don't they, all day long, bitty bitty bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Yeah, do they, do they, do they. rich. Idle, idle, diddle, diddle, dum. I built a big tall house with rooms by the dozen, right in the middle of the town. 5-tin roof with real wooden floors below. There'll be one long staircase just going up, one longer coming down. Won't lead you nowhere, just for sure.
Hello, this is Jeffery Geisener, founder of the Jewish Culture and Holocaust, October 7th Remembrance, and Stand Against Hate International Communities. I welcome you to this month's film Zoom entitled, Our Fiddlers Are on Our Roof with Special Guests, Willie Handler, author and storyteller, Out from the Shadows, Mark NEWHOUSE, author and storyteller, The Devil's Bookkeeper, Trilogy, Keith NEWHOUSE, author of My TIO'S Pulse. Enjoy the film, and there will be a live Q&A at the end of the film. Please stay and share in the live discussions with today's talented artists. I will also join the live Q&A.
When all was dark and all was sad, and all my strength almost spent, every day like the next, every breath might be the last. A time so bleak, the body weak, despair is rising everywhere, the pain too deep, too numb to weep, couldn't bear it anymore. Saw a rainbow in the night, heard a voice cry, just go on. Felt a hand wipe my tear, a gleam of light. Seemed gone, and I was tired and oh so worn. Shadows loom, they overtake, from the gloom and escape. You breathe the fear, dream of life beyond this deep and dark abyss. You just exist, an endless night, ever yearning for the dawn. A ray of sun, a bird flies pass by, a soothing breeze beneath blue skies, a fleeting moment you forget, and you transcend the tragic life. See the rainbow in the night, raising rise, behold the night, embraced us in our darkest hour, we survive. Oh, the rainbow in the night gave the courage to run. Let us take me back to life, we
Indifference is not an option, just as racism is not, just as evil is not. But that is true also of education. The opposite of knowledge is not ignorance, but indifference. The opposite of beauty is not ugliness, but indifference. The opposite of life is not death, but indifference to life and death.
What is it even coming back now? Difficult?
Each time I come, I try not to speak for a day or two or three. And just to go back and find the silence that was in me then. And I say to myself, how many of us did not live and simply vanish? Look at this place. The immensity of the place. It's a universe. And when you think of the numbers, 1 million, 1.5 million people, just think country or a city that has 1.5 million inhabitants and simply vanishes. And so I think of that. I come here and try to see the invisible and try to hear the inaudible. And I always see what I had seen the last time I was here.
The story of Tuvia Arieli, the taxi driver. This week, as usual, I was driving through the streets of Tel Aviv looking for passengers. Suddenly, a man waved me down. He looked quite eccentric, an elderly gentleman wearing a buttoned-up Miami shirt, a gold watch, and bracelets. He got into the taxi and said, "Take me to Schenken Street." We started driving and began chatting. He told me about his life, his businesses, investments, and his many successes. After a few minutes, he asked if he could smoke in the cab. I said, "Sure, go ahead." Then he pulled out a cigar. And let me tell you, I know cigars. That one was worth at least $500. As I reached for my cheap Next Light lighter, he said, No, I'll light it for you." He pulled out a Zippo lighter worth another $1,000. As he leaned forward to light my cigarette, his sleeve rolled back, and there it was, a tattooed number on his arm, the kind of number burned into the flesh of Jews taken to the Nazi death camps. In a split second, I photographed that number in my mind. I was overcome with emotion. Almost instinctively, my foot pressed the brake and I pulled over. Turning to him, I asked with a shaky voice, "Are you a Holocaust survivor?" He looked at me, irritated and confused. "What, you've never seen a Holocaust survivor before? Just drive, you're wasting my time." Still shaken, I asked him to share his story. He wasn't used to people, let alone taxi drivers, taking such interest in his past. After hesitating, he opened up. He told me his entire family was murdered in the Holocaust. After the war, he searched tirelessly to see if anyone from his family had survived. Rumors led him to believe that his brother had made it to Israel. He arrived here, but all he ever heard was that his brother had died. Since then, he'd lived alone, in this world, all alone. When I later shared this story at a gathering of taxi drivers, I paused at this part and took a deep breath. The room was silent. My friends, fully immersed in the story, urged me to continue, but before I did, I said, "Before I tell you what happened next, I need to share my own story. You all know me as a religious man, but I didn't grow up this way. I was born in a completely secular kibbutz. I had no connection to religion. One rainy day as a teenager, I sat in the kibbutz dining hall with no appetite, feeling nauseous. I decided to skip the meal and finish my shift early. My job involved a giant steel vat where we would dump potatoes to be chopped. At the bottom were massive spinning blades, like a blender. I climbed the vat to dump in the potatoes, slipped on the wet edge, and fell inside. The machine was running. I was being pulled slowly, helplessly downward and toward the blades. I screamed. I tried climbing out, but the inner wall was too high and slippery. No one heard me. Everyone was still at lunch. And then for the first time in my life, I called out to God, "Please help me. Don't let me die. Save me." Suddenly, out of nowhere, a hand reached in, grabbed me, and pulled me out. Tattooed on that arm was a number. It was Zalman, a Holocaust survivor from our kibbutz. He was silent, broken, and never spoke to anyone because of his trauma. But that day, he saved my life. From that moment on, Zalman's number stayed with me. I remembered every digit. When I joined the army, the first 3 digits of my military ID matched the first 3 on his arm. When I bought my first apartment, the middle digits of the address matched the next 3. Later, my phone number ended with the exact same 3 digits. Zalman's number haunted me, guided me. So, back to that day with the eccentric man in the back seat. As he lit my cigarette, I saw his tattooed number, and it was almost identical to Zalman's. Just 1 digit was different. At that moment, something clicked. I slammed the brakes, locked the doors, and without explaining, made a U-turn and began speeding in the opposite direction. The man panicked. "Where are you going? What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just drove faster. I wasn't sure why. I just knew I was doing the right thing. I was headed to my old kibbutz. I had to find Zalman. I didn't even know if he was still alive. So many years had passed. When we got there, I ran straight to his old apartment. I knocked hard, not even sure he still lived there. The door opened. Zalman, alive, standing there with that same distant look. I grabbed him in a hug, overcome with emotion. He didn't react, didn't remember me, still distant, silent. Then the man from my cab walked up behind me, saw Zalman, and suddenly wrapped his arms around him in a trembling embrace. Zalman and the passenger were brothers, long lost, disconnected by war, by time, by silence, but now reunited. And for the first time in my life, I saw Zalman speak. And in that moment, I realized Zalman was sent from heaven to save my life so that one day I could return the favor and give him his brother back. This was no coincidence. This was divine.
It was a very tense household. My father had a lot of issues with anger. It was a difficult upbringing.
Willie Handler's parents, Ella and Shifra Handler, also survived the Nazis. Most of their family didn't. Their world here, he says, was small, lonely, yet crowded by the war.
My parents didn't have much of a social circle, so even they didn't see very many people. To some extent, it was like maybe the war never really ended, and that they were just still struggling to survive.
Handler started to write his family story, only to find more haunted spaces. His father had lost his first family in the war, but had never mentioned his youngest daughter.
So you think he buried the fact that he had another child because it was too hard?
Definitely. My father, for 1 month in Gross-Rosen concentration camp, was a Sonderkommando. And he was putting bodies into crematorium, and that include babies. You know, even for a few weeks, that would traumatize you. It is history now, but they live inside of me. And so I'm still here. My parents' experience, their trauma has been passed on to me.
Handler says he used to struggle with his own anger and grew up finding safety in the shadows.
I actually worked in the Ontario Public Service. One of my weaknesses was I didn't like to take a lot of credit for things. And I'm positive that it's passed down from my dad, who in the camps, one of the things that you didn't want to do was draw attention to yourself. You wanted to just blend in the masses. Being selected out was usually had negative implications. Hey! Hey, big guy!
Handler says he can't rewrite history, but he's grateful for a hand in the present.
You. One of the things that bothered me my whole life was not having any grandparents. Definitely with my grandkids. I cherish every moment with them, and I want them to have the full experience of having grandparents so they have memories that I didn't have. It's like monkeys.
Hello, today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Willie Handler, author of Out from the Shadows, Growing Up with Holocaust Survivor Parents. Welcome, Willie.
Thank you for having me.
I am really happy to have you. Before we really get into your book and your writing, why don't you give everyone a quick, what are they going to find when they open up these pages?
My life story, more or less, but actually it's more than that. This is not like, I think, an ordinary memoir. Sometimes I refer to it as an investigative memoir. So the beginning of the book really gives the history of my family, which I actually did not know, and I had to spend 2 years researching. My parents are no longer around, and they didn't say much.
Right.
And then it gets into my childhood, and then I talk about things like trauma, and which is very common in families of Holocaust survivors.
Right.
And then the sort of the end piece is a little bit of background about anti-Semitism.
Fantastic. What made you decide to do this? Your parents were gone. They had never really talked too much about being Holocaust survivors. What made you decide that you were going to kind of like open that all up for inspection?
I never wanted to write this book, and that's what I tell everybody. This was not my idea. I was against it. My wife kept telling me, you should write your parents' story. You know, people would find it interesting. And I said, oh, this world doesn't need another Holocaust book.
Right.
And then, you know, I started thinking about it and going, well, I don't know that much. I don't know much about my family's history. Right. I swear to God, I didn't even know the names of some of my aunts and uncles. They had perished in the war, and their names were never mentioned. Right. So my own curiosity, I started to dig up stuff. I remember when I first put pen to paper, though really I wasn't using pen or paper, so to speak. I wrote an 1,800-word blog post. That was all I knew. That was it. And a lot of it was wrong, as I found out. And so I became curious, and I wanted to find out what were their stories and who were my ancestors. And then I realized nobody in the family knows either. And that's when I decided I'm going to write the book after all. And I wrote this book for my grandkids.
Yeah.
That they would know, and they would be able to tell their kids one day. And lo and behold, I found out, well, there's a lot of people out there who want to hear this story as well. And
how did you go about collecting all of this family history?
And so I researched archives, found all kinds of stuff. Read some. I read some historical books, some scientific papers, research papers. Like, there was a lot of stuff out there, as it turns out, and a lot of it related to family. I actually found I found somebody who'd written a little piece about my mother's father, the stuff I didn't know about.
Right.
And it's just all started, and then I had to put it all together. I went to Poland 2 years ago and visited my my father's birthplace and where he lived, and I visited Auschwitz, and it was a kind of a heavy moment as well. So it was just, there was a lot of information out there.
I'm sure, and there's probably way more information that you found than you were possibly able to put into the book. Is that?
Yeah, and I remember my mother was, after Steven Spielberg released Schindler's List, he used his share of the film to create a foundation to interview Holocaust survivors. Many thousands, tens of thousands were interviewed, and it's that foundation is now housed at USC. And my mother was interviewed in 1995. I never even looked at the recording. So a couple of years, 2 years ago, I reached out to the foundation, got a copy of her interview. There was a lot of stuff in there I did not even know. And it's kind of, there was a period, for a period of my life, I didn't want to know anything about it. And then, and I've spoken to a lot of other children of Holocaust survivors, and same kind of thing happened is then later in your life, when your parents are no longer around, you have all these questions as well. Right. And one of the things, there's two reasons why survivors do not talk about their experience. One is to shield their children from harmful information.
Right.
In some cases, they will tell you very, very general things that happened, but nothing too specific or graphic. But for many, they were protecting themselves more than anything else, is that they bury those bad memories and all that trauma and don't want to be reminded. So in my father's case, he's a classic example. If I started asking him questions, he would get very emotional and at some point would start to cry. And most children of Holocaust survivors understand that their parents went through great hardship and had a lot of pain and grief and bad memories, and don't want to create more pain for them. So that's why they don't ask the questions.
Yeah.
And as I also talk to these children and grandchildren of survivors and find out about their about the parents and their grandparents' experience, the source of the trauma is like all over the place too, because they weren't all in concentration camps. But they experienced some form of trauma during the war. One of the things my father did repeatedly say, that he had lost a wife and child during the war. So in 1940, when he was actually in the ghetto, he got married and had a child, and her name was Leah. And this was repeated over and over again. And and all I knew is that she was 4 years old, his daughter. So one of the things that I wanted to uncover was 4 years old when? Like, when was she born? And I didn't know when he was married.
Right.
I just knew her first name. So I started digging up in a database, and I got a listing of birth and marriage. Actually, I step back a bit. The first thing that seemed unusual is in one of the archives of Nazi documents, I found a registration card in one of the camps that he was in, and it listed his wife's name. So that's when I found out, her last name. And then he had two daughters, 2 and 4. and two children, if I recall. And I'm going, what? That can't be right. And I'm going, no, I just thought that was an error. So going forward, I wanted to find out when he was married and when his daughter was born. And the records come back, and I found, and it gave the date of their marriage, and it listed 2 kids, 2 daughters. I'm going, what? And it just kind of hit me. I'm going, what? How could that be? And I told my siblings, and I told the family, and everybody was like in shock, absolutely in shock. And so that's kind of what sent me scrambling to Poland. And so I needed to find out how could this possibly be? How did he forget about it? Was he not around at the time? Had he been already deported to the camps when she was born? And who knows? There was no way of knowing. And so when I went to Poland in 2022, I went to the town hall, and they retrieved the documents, and they had registration books, and they handwrite all the births, deaths, and marriages in a registration. And they showed me the 2 birth registrations, and they were in German. And so I took photos of them to get translated, and I see at the bottom my father had signed the documents, so he knew he had 2 children. And my conclusion was that the trauma that he experienced, he pushed the memory of that younger child out of his head.
Think about it.
I'm not even sure he knew when they died.
Yeah, probably not.
Because he was not around when they were deported to Auschwitz.
Yeah, that would have been a very difficult thing to find. So let's talk a little bit. You were bringing up this idea of generational trauma. And let's talk a little bit, like, what is that? And then how did it affect you? How has it affected your kids, your grandkids? Like, at what point does generational trauma no longer have a ripple in the following generations?
Well, one thing that nobody really knows, I think, that's my view. So trauma gets stored. I'm not a clinician, but I understand that trauma gets stored in the body, and somehow it gets stored in your genes and actually can alter the genes. And once it gets stored in your genes, obviously it can get passed down to your children. And that's how it gets passed down. And it will get passed down each generation. Until you, and this part I'm not totally clear, but I think if you, there are ways to sort of stop the transmission, or at least modify it, which is to do exactly what I've done, which is to openly talk about it, share the experience, let your children know about what happened. Get them to be open about their own experiences rather than holding it in, because holding it in means you're going to store it in your body, and somehow it's going to get transmitted down. So that's really how it works. Now, the interesting observation that I found that when I was talking to a lot of children's survivors was they didn't have great childhoods. So what you actually have is a combination of things working. And then I think in most people that's the case. Most people have been exposed to some type of trauma.
Right.
And so how you deal with it, that really determines your kind of future. So many of them, they have this generational trauma that was passed on to them, but they also might have experienced childhood trauma. They might have been victims of sexual abuse. And so there's many layers of trauma.
Right.
And that's where it gets very complicated.
How do you think your parents' trauma affected you as a child?
Well, I had very loving parents, but they were what I would say distant and uninvolved. They were focused on survival. Literally, you come out of the camps and you reestablish your life, but you're still in survival mode. And their focus was on making a living, providing food, shelter, clothing. That's kind of about it. And so they're uninvolved and distant, which means as a child, you're on your own a lot. You're not getting much guidance. And so no one helped me with my homework. No one helped me with problems that I had with other kids. Nobody helped me choose a school to go to, what courses I should take, took me to sports and other activities. None of that happened.
Right.
You're on your own. I joined sports teams on my own, got my own equipment, went to practices on my own. Everything was on your own. So you grow up too quickly. You become very independent, but you also are constantly in survival mode. So you're insecure, lack confidence, lack trust, because those are things that were not, you didn't have the parental guidance to guide you through sort of these difficult times. And it kind of just builds up on you. So that's directly result of their trauma. But as well, there are other aspects that manifest itself that, like I inherited my father's grief. So his grief for his family, I experienced that. His mistrust of people, I inherited that. So and his ability to store and compartmentalize bad memories, I picked that one up as well. So those are things, so it's a combination of your childhood experiences and things that were actually directly passed on.
Passed down to you. When people read your book, what are you hoping they take away? If they took away one thing, what do you want them to really understand after reading Out of the Shadows?
The legacy of the Holocaust, or the shadow as I call it,
right,
lives on. And so and the descendants are invisible victims. They don't talk about their experience. Nobody really has a clue that these people are as damaged as their parents were. And I think that's something that I didn't even realize. So if I didn't really understand it, nobody does. The one thing I can say about anti-Semitism, it's been around thousands of years.
Right.
It has never gone away. It may go below the surface. It's cyclical in nature. But the basis has never changed. And so what we're experiencing right now is that all that hate that's been under the surface mostly, but not exclusively, is coming to the surface again. I've heard many people, two observations I have. One is when I interviewed children of survivors, I asked them all, what kind of anti-Semitism did you were you exposed to growing up? Most of them said none. But it was there, but they didn't they didn't see it. And so this explosion of anti-Semitism that's going around now is a complete shock to them, is traumatizing them, because it's something, to them, it's something new.
Right.
And so and so they're kind of reliving their parents' experience. One thing, I don't believe we're heading towards another Holocaust.
Good.
But we are we are in a period of a lot of persecution. I call this now the post-Holocaust period. October 7th, 2023 began what I would say is a post-Holocaust, where if there was any sympathy for Jews between 1945 and 2023, it disappeared. So that's one thing. And in fact, a lot of my non-Jewish friends, many of them say they don't see it, because, when it comes to hate, unless it's directed
at you, you don't notice it.
You don't notice it.
Right.
And these are people who are sympathetic, but they can't. They don't see it. I think what people can do is educate yourself.
Okay.
Because guess what? The school system doesn't tell you what's in my book.
No, it does not.
That I've been told by many, many people. Oh, this is not how the war was described to be at school.
Right.
So that's one thing. So you need to learn about what happened. You have to really learn about the history of anti-Semitism, which is the basis is actually on conspiracy theories. Way before there was, Anon and all these, way before the internet, there were always conspiracy theories directed at Jewish people.
Right.
And so the one step is, get yourself educated, learn what really is going on. Two is speak out, support Jewish people, because right now there's a shortage of allies, and what's going on in the Middle East is a tragedy. But that is what hate will bring you to.
Right.
And there's hate on both sides.
Right.
There's no question. So, but that has nothing to do with diaspora Jews. They're not fighting. And so when you see it whether you're in London or you live in New York or wherever you live, when you see it, you have to speak out. And you have to speak out and you also have to push politicians to protect everyone's human rights, not just some of us.
Right.
Essence of the people shall never
never be changed. What did you gain? Hang your heads in shame. Never again. Never
Everywhere is violence. There must be a better way. Can't just sit in silence and pray. Can't close our eyes and hope for a better day. Yeah. Everybody's biased. Usiniondoke. There must be another way. Nikuambie. Wanna sleep all night and dream all day. Babies crying, mama's far away. Yeah. Leo, Leo. Together we rise up. Leo, Leo. Divided we fall. Why is everyone so quiet? Usiniwache. You must have something to say. Nikuambie. The devil man trying to take my soul away. Higher power gonna show me the way. Leo, Leo. It's so much hotter today than yesterday. I worry about tomorrow more than yesterday. So much harder to go the other way. I worry about the sorrow this will bring one day. Leo, Leo. From the ashes we rise up. Leo, Leo. Say never again. Every single one's on trial. Usinilenge. Nobody gets away, not today. Can't close my eyes and make this go away. Wanna see tomorrow and still live today. Leo, Leo.
Meeting with families, President Obama and Vice President Biden placing 49 white roses, one for each victim, at a memorial site for those killed in the Orlando nightclub massacre.
Soon, each victim will be laid to rest. Loved ones already saying their final goodbyes as the funerals for the fallen begin. The victims honored amid calls to end such senseless mass shootings.
The president also urging lawmakers to, quote, end the plague of violence that these weapons inflict on so many lives.
Our team coverage begins tonight with Local 10 News reporter Michael Seiden live in Orlando with more. Michael.
The president spent most of his time with the grieving families. He also met with those wounded survivors, the same men and women who were forced to run for their lives.
A heartbreaking moment as President Obama and Vice President Biden visited this growing memorial, placing bouquets of 49 roses, one for each victim of the nightclub massacre. They then stood in silence, a sign of respect for the victims of this hateful act of violence.
So many young people in their 20s and 30s. So many students who were focused on the future.
For 2 hours Thursday, the commander-in-chief met privately with grieving parents of the victims and the survivors.
These families could be our families. In fact, they are our family. They're part of the American family.
Very, very emotional moment that we just passed over there. The Mr. President and the Vice President hugged the family, especially the mother.
The president also took time out to shake the hands of first responders, praising them for their heroic actions. He also made it clear that it's time to come together as a country.
And we're all going to have to work together at every level of government, across political lines, to do more to stop killers who want to terrorize us.
Before heading back to Washington, Mr. Obama making the following promise.
We will continue to be relentless against terrorist groups like ISIL and Al-Qaeda. We are going to destroy them.
And before heading back to Washington, the president did meet with the owners of Pulse nightclub, which tonight still remains an active crime.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark NEWHOUSE, and I'm the proud father of today's special guest, Keith NEWHOUSE, owner of NEWHOUSE Creative Group, featured in USA Today and The Village Voice, among other major media outlets. Keith is also the author of My TIO'S Pulse, an award-winning picture book which became a powerful community project featuring illustrations donated by 22 artists and with all profits donated to the victims of the Pulse tragedy and their families. Keith is using NEWHOUSE Creative Group and NCG Author Services in his mission of inspiring the readers and writers of today and tomorrow. My TIO'S Pulse has helped countless children learn about not just the Orlando Pulse tragedy of 2016, but how to cope and feel safe with violent incidents plaguing the world today. Hi, Keith. Thanks for sharing this fascinating adventure with us and letting me turn the tables on you since you interviewed me in the past.
Thank you so much, Dad.
Can you tell me what inspired you to write My TIO'S Pulse?
Well, having lived 10 minutes away from the Pulse nightclub when the tragedy occurred, I knew that I wanted to find a way to help and to give back to the community. So after singing in a concert with over 40 performing groups to benefit the victims, I knew I still wanted to do more. At work one day, I asked my manager how she was going to tell her kids about the tragedy. She's one of the best parents I know and a former elementary teacher, so like when the Olympics came around, she always made lesson plans for her kids where they'd have Greek night, eat Greek food, talk about the Greek gods, and everything was a lesson plan with her kids. So I asked her how she was going to tell her kids about the tragedy. She told me she was stumped. And I thought if a parent as wonderful and prepared as that didn't know what to say, how would a parent without an education background have any idea? Then a few nights later, I had a dream, and the story of My TIO'S Pulse was born. It came to me in a dream. I never thought I'd be the one to tell the story, though. I hadn't written anything publishable. But when I told a friend of mine in marketing about the idea, she said I just had to be the one to tell it.
Well, I'm glad you found another parent as good as us to help you out with this. But let me ask you this. You also managed to get the support of a large number of artists. How'd you manage that?
Well, when I told my marketing friend about the book, she connected me with Ethan Long, who had written and illustrated over 100 picture books, including a PBS series. He then connected me to other artist organizations within Orlando and the Central Florida area, and we were inundated with people who wanted to help. It was just amazing. From there, we had a psychotherapist who had worked with children who had lost loved ones at Pulse, as well as a number of organizations and media outlets who also got involved. By the time the book was published, we had over 40 individuals donating their time, talent, and services to make the My TIO'S Pulse project a reality. We even had a printer who donated all printings of the book at just the cost of paper, no ink charge and no labor charge.
I think it's an amazing part of the story is how you got so many people involved. You know, My TIO'S Pulse, the book, is much more than just about that one incident, though, you know, terrible as it was. How do you see it helping others, especially in these times of bullying, hate, and rising anti-Semitism?
Absolutely. Although the storyline of My TIO'S Pulse is about a child whose uncle was involved in the Pulse tragedy, the lessons of the book are so much far more widespread. The psychotherapist I worked with, Kenny Tio, described the Pulse tragedy as an unsafe person who was angry, hurt people. Although it doesn't involve the words hate, bullying, or anti-Semitism, the same can be said for any kind of hate or anti-Semitism. It always comes back to an unsafe person who was angry, hurt someone. He also had the same kind of widespread messaging that applied to the lessons that children, he said to give children feel safe. So if a child is affected by a tragedy, the things you should encourage a child to do are, 1, talk about their feelings, let others help when they feel sad or mad, 2, find a trusted adult, and 3, ask questions. If a child doesn't understand something, encourage them to ask questions. Using those 3 steps, any child, or even an adult, can be better prepared to cope with incidents of hate, bullying, or anti-Semitism.
I totally agree with those ideas, Keith. I think they're so important. Your publishing company that you and I started was designed to help give back to the world. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you are working to solve problems like bullying, hate, and anti-Semitism, which is so important to our audience.
Well, as you said, we started NEWHOUSE Creative Group together as a way to give back both financially and educationally. I personally always been involved in volunteering, actually since I was a kid, and you guys got me involved in the soup kitchen, serving Thanksgiving dinner with the miracle of the mashed potatoes that wouldn't end. So this was just a way to give back in bigger ways. Besides the Pulse Project, a number of our books deal with these themes of hate, including the Bully Stoppers Club Handbook, which is available for free from our website. And we also have a growing Jewish collection, including your international award-winning Devil's Bookkeeper series about the LODZ ghetto, the young adult My Family Secret, The Holocaust, as well as Rabbi Mark Leslie Shook's series, Search for the Sacred Scroll, which is kind of a Da Vinci Code for Judaism. We've also helped self-publish a number of books that are giving back. For example, Stacy Cook's Beyond Words teaches about communication to get past our hate and create a more compassionate world, one conversation at a time. Then there's Tamika Seaton's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Passport, which is a workbook and a roadmap to embrace diversity and champion equity.
I think you're showing that you are much more than just a publishing company. You're a caring company. So let me ask you this. What advice do you have for anyone who has thought about becoming an author?
Well, I always say everybody has a story, so share yours. Show your passion and use your story to make the world a better place. If we at NEWHOUSE Creative Group can help you, just please let us know what we can do.
Thank you, Keith, for being my very kind and caring son and sharing your dream of positivism and hope with our friends. I want to thank Jeff for his efforts to overcome hate and anti-Semitism. Visit newhousecreativegroup.com for free materials to help writers in combat hate, bullying, and anti-Semitism. You can also ask about our group discounts, author services, including a free author marketing session. Most authors hate marketing, but with Keith, you won't. And I'll say that even though he's my son. So learn about NCG Cares. If we can help you in some way, we're happy to do that. My TIO'S Pulse is available on Amazon or from newhousecreativegroup.com. Thank you, Keith, again, and thank you, everybody, for caring.
Tell me why, oh, what can we live together? Tell me why, oh, what can we live together? Everybody wants to live together. Why can't we live together? No more war, no more war, no more war. Just a little peace in this world. No more war, no more war. All we want is just a little peace in this world. together. Everybody wants to live together. Why can't we live together? And then you come.
I can hear cannons, and I can see fire in the sky to the south. The war is so near. LODZ will be taken any moment. Our neighbor insists we should leave. Run away as far as we can. Leave everything. Just get away. His wife is crying. But where can we go? Panic. Throngs leaving their homes. My mother talks Mrs. Grabinski out of her ridiculous plans to flee. Other neighbors come. More Jews seeking advice. Someone says everyone should run, so the enemy won't send us off to work camps. My father doesn't know what to do. He runs to my uncle, and then uncle back to father. They've decided we're going to stay. We will not run. Friday, September 8th, 1939. German patrols are moving on Pietrkowska Street. LODZ is occupied. Their faces are like Martians. The conquerors. Damn them. Our local Germans greeted their countrymen. Civilians, even boys and girls, are jumping into the passing military cars with a happy Heil Hitler. Whatever was hidden in the past now shows its true face.
Building on Piotrkowska Street are ordered to leave their apartments in 15 minutes. Anyone found inside is simply shot. 100 people are killed. We run for our lives to the filthy and narrow streets of the renowned Baluti slum.
everyone. My name is Keith Newhouse. I'm the owner of Newhouse Creative Group Publishing and NCG Author Services, inspiring the readers and writers of today and tomorrow. Today, I'm proud to interview my father, the multi-award-winning author of The Devil's Bookkeepers and My Family Secret, The Holocaust, as well as a former award-winning Long Island teacher. His lifelong concern about anti-Semitism and hate compelled him to create a new children's book to help parents and teachers with these vital subjects. Thank you, Dad, for being here.
Thank you, Keith, for doing this.
So, Dad, why did you decide to write a book about hate and anti-Semitism now?
Play not for fun, I can assure you of that. You know, I recently heard a presentation that revealed frightening data showing that much of the world's people, including in America, either do not know about the Holocaust or believe it is exaggerated or falsification. With all the headlines about anti-Semitism today, I found I had to do something, apply my elementary school teacher brain to try a different approach that hopefully may reach beyond the choir.
What's so unique about your approach to anti-Semitism?
Well, I believe it is difficult for many people, especially Jews, to think about anti-Semitism as a prime example of hate in general and not in isolation. What I wanted to do is create a child-friendly book with illustrations that first deals with hate in general and then sort of morphs into anti-Jewish hate as a concrete example. By couching anti-Semitism within a book that deals with hate in all its forms, I'm hoping to reach beyond the choir, those already committed to stop anti-Semitism. I want to treat it not as solely a Jewish problem, but as a beacon for all people to care about.
What do you see as the biggest issue in teaching about anti-Semitism?
It's a tough question. I think a lot of teachers and grown-ups, they do teach about prejudice and hate, even anti-Semitism. But it's mainly the people, children are people, who are part of the choir already. We need to reach out to the children and grandchildren of those who are already subscribed. But we must also, I think, reach beyond the choir. I wanted a positive approach. Who wants to read a book about something that's always negative? My question became, how do we make this a positive experience, one that attracts youngsters, teachers, and parents? That, to me, is the key. As a teacher, I did it all the time.
Do you think that's possible?
I not only think it's possible, but I think it's essential. Otherwise, only those who already believe that hate, prejudice, and anti-Semitism are wrong will be reached, even by our best efforts. What do we really accomplish when we reach only those already committed? My favorite story is about an old man walking on the beach where thousands of starfish are dying. He picks one up and a boy comes along and says, "Hey, what a waste of time. You can't save them all." And the old man replies, "At least I saved one." If my work saves one child from hating others...
What makes you believe that you can help when so many others have already tried?
You know I have an elementary school teacher's brain. My amazing wife still says I think like a child. For example, how do we define hate? In my book, it's simple. Hate is a terrible, strong emotion. It simply means you want to destroy something or someone. Children are shocked when they learn that hate is such an intense dislike that you want to destroy or kill whatever it is you hate.
Can you give us an example of how your elementary teacher brain explains these adult ideas to children?
Normally, I would take that as an insult, but let's take prejudice. My oldest son, when he was a baby, refused to taste ice cream because he didn't like the looks of it. Meshuggah. One day, I put a tiny bit on my finger and placed it on his lips. Well, the rest is history. In other words, once you get to know someone, taste the ice cream. You realize you were wrong to hate them. Simple examples in my book make complex, abstract ideas as digestible as ice cream.
So you try to make abstract ideas simple. But what else do you see as your goal?
Well, As a classroom teacher, I focus not on content, dumping down loads of facts into kids' brains. My focus was on empowering students to gather and weigh information and make their decisions independently. Another example of my elementary teacher brain at work. If someone tells you to hate all rocks because you may trip on a rock, should you hate, want to destroy all rocks? Imagine our lives without rocks. By taking abstract concepts and providing concrete examples such as this one, we're doing much more than just saying hate is wrong because I, your teacher or parent, say so. We're helping children deduce this for themselves. We're shifting ownership to the children, empowering them to analyze information and make responsible decisions.
What are some ways that you suggest that this could happen?
Well, I think we need to start young, in elementary school. My biggest concern is that anti-Semitism is regarded as an isolated subject, and it appears in a classroom only when discussing the Holocaust. When I was teaching sixth grade, the Holocaust appeared in the social studies textbook in 2 paragraphs near the end of the book. Sometimes teachers may not even reach it. Teaching not to hate Jews in isolation, I'm just not sure how lasting we are in effectuating a change in attitude.
You mentioned before the idea to reach beyond the choir. What do you think could be done to reach beyond the choir?
I think that's the key to this whole question. We need to approach anti-Jewish hate and the Holocaust not only as an isolated subject, or just anti-Semitism teachings may be construed as exclusively relevant to Jews, much as the Holocaust in isolation may be viewed as a Jewish footnote of history fading into the past. We must prevent Jews and non-Jews from thinking these lessons are relevant only to Jews. Anti-Semitism should be taught as a prime example of what hate and prejudice can unleash to any people, not just Jews. Rather than teaching it as a Jewish phenomenon, thousands of years old, it needs to be elevated as part of a curriculum that addresses it as an extreme example of hate. Yes, teach about the Holocaust, but make it relevant to all children within an anti-hate curriculum.
How would you incorporate these ideas in the real world?
In my new book, I move from the idea that hate means you want to destroy the target of your hate.
So how would you incorporate these ideas in the real world?
In my new book, I move from the idea that hate means you want to destroy the target of your hate to prejudice and hate against groups of people. All groups in America have experienced some form of hate and prejudice. And then I move finally to the oldest example, the hate of Jews, past and present. Current events are convincing proof that we must educate all children about anti-Semitism, all children and adults.
Where does the Holocaust fit in with this idea of reaching beyond the choir?
Well, I need you to understand, I'm not saying don't teach about the Holocaust, not at all. I was asked by a professor after he read my novels, what makes the Shoah more critical than, for example, what happened to blacks and indigenous people in our country? I have to be honest, I was stumped. But then I came up with the answer. It's not a question of which group suffered more, but that the Holocaust was unprecedented because, 1, it was rapidly government sponsored. 2, it was a genocide of 6 million civilians simply because they were Jewish. And it took place in approximately 7 years. It was totally illogical. The Germans diverted some of their best minds, resources, transportation, money to commit genocide while engaged in a world war. 4, it was impersonal. It was a mechanical mass extermination of unarmed people simply who did not meet a leader's standards. He called them undesirable. For all these reasons and the fact that led to a world war and still impacts so many people even today, the Holocaust is an unprecedented example. But teaching about it in isolation is not going to change anything unless we gear education to reach beyond our small choir.
That's a great idea. Any other thoughts on this?
Well, you know, Keith, I remember when your grandmother, my mom, spoke about the horrors of Auschwitz and the LODZ ghetto. I had absolutely horrible nightmares. As I researched my novels, I learned that we were not merely sheep blindly going to be slaughtered. That's a misconception. There were many stories of heroism and kindness. It is vital for all children to know that important idea. In my books and in my presentations, I don't focus on death and gas chambers, but on people who fought with courage and resourcefulness to find love and life. I don't believe education should frighten children. They should know that we had heroes and positive role models, as well as villains and haters.
How does your new book test these ideas?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that was the whole purpose of it. My new children's book incorporates anti-Semitism within an anti-hate handbook. I use my elementary school teacher brain to make it child-friendly. It's being illustrated by a child, my talented grandson. My objective is to create a book that says you don't need to be Jewish or a believer to learn about anti-Semitism. It teaches that hating Jews, any people, is as ridiculous as hating all rocks or hating ice cream. Teaching all children not to hate, not just the choir, is vital today.
Thank you so much, Dad, for sharing your thoughts today.
You know, thank you, Keith and Jeffrey, for inviting me to share my thoughts. I hope my novels and my new book help people join the choir and say never hate again to anyone, anywhere. Taste the ice cream, folks. You may like, even love it.
Part of the problem inherent in the question is that it suggests that the future will function exactly as it has in the past, that tourism is static. It isn't. And that implies that a population and a location with tens of thousands of years of history can suddenly go out of fashion. And they can't. To call La Puglia,
the Jewish cooking of southern Italy. We'll be at the Awaiting Table Cooking School with Silvestro Silvestori in Lecce, Italy. Each day we'll cook Jewish dishes from a different southern Italian region, including Rome and Lazio, Puglia, Sicily, Calabria, and Naples and Campania. During our time together, we'll shop for ingredients like locals, learn about olive oil and wine, spend time by the sea, and field trip to Jewish museums and nearby ancient towns. So come walk in the footsteps of Jews who have lived in southern Italy in the past and learn about the current Jewish communities. I'd love for you to join us.
Occupation of Lithuania during World War II is a chapter in history that bears witness to the complexities and hardships faced by the Lithuanian people. In August 1939, the Nazis and the Soviets signed a non-aggression pact, also known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. They would not attack each other. Also, spheres of influence were decided, and Lithuania was to be in the Soviet sphere of influence. In July 1940, the Soviets occupied Lithuania and declared the Lithuanian Socialist Soviet Republic shortly after. The Nazis launched their attack, Operation Barbarossa, retreating NKVD units, Soviet Union Secret Service, the predecessor for the KGB, killed countless of Lithuanian political prisoners. Most notorious was the Rīnai massacre, where 70 to 80 Lithuanians were tortured to death by the NKVD. The Nazis conquered Lithuania in a week. The Nazis presented themselves as liberators, but they were not. The Lithuanian wish for independence was fully ignored. Lithuania became part of the Reichskommissariat Ostland. Soon after the Nazis arrived, the mass killings of the Jewish population started. The Lithuanians assisted the Nazis on a large scale. Why did the Lithuanians do that? Well, partially because of the already existing anti-Semitism in the country, but also because Jews were seen as Soviet collaborators, and the wounds off the Soviet atrocities were still very fresh. Most infamous were the public killings at the Litvikas garage in Kaunas, where a massive pogrom started as soon as the Nazis invaded Lithuania. Jewish people were publicly beaten to death with clubs. The Lithuanians slaughtered Jews. Over the years, many would die because of diseases, starvation, and summary executions. On Sunday, June 22nd, 1941, Adolf Hitler launched a surprise attack against the Soviet Union. It was the start of Operation Barbarossa, the Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union during World War II. With an enormous combat force causing unprecedented death and destruction, Operation Barbarossa is considered the largest invasion and also the bloodiest conflict in human history.
I've had the yearning to go back to Lithuania because I always felt there were two of me. The one of me that was before the war and the one of me that was after the war, and there was really a big split. While my parents were alive, I still had the connection with the past. And I had that feeling of I knew who that little girl was. When both my parents died, it became more and more important for me to go back and reconnect with my memories and to revisit some of the people who are still alive, who saved our lives, and to kind of bear witness with the people, with my family and the friends that came with us, to what happened to us, to me, to our family.
Jeffrey, you are muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for all joining us, for coming to today's program, The Fiddlers on the Roof. I'm honored to have you all, and I wish you would all come on with your put your cameras on so we could all see you. I also want to thank, and I'm honored that we have two Holocaust survivors with us. We have, and I want, there's Sammy Steigman. Hello, Sammy. And we have Ben Midler, who is with us. Hopefully he'll come on screen. I really want to thank you. And Sammy, I want to have you unmute yourself if you can. Why don't you all unmute yourself? I want to open up the dialogue. We have our special guests, presenters. We have Mark Newhouse. Thanks, Mark, in his book, to both the Bookkeeper's trilogy, Devil's Bookkeeper trilogy, and Turn Hate into Friendship. We have Willie Handler. We have Keith Newhouse, and others here with us. So hello, Daniel. Nice to see you from your apartment in Philadelphia. Thanks for there. And Diana from Oregon, and Devorah from Massachusetts. Leah, where are you from?
New Jersey.
New Jersey, hi. So I'm going to open it up. Any of you have questions for our presenters? Anything you want to chat with, talk about? It's wide open for discussion. It's great to have you all, my friends, being with us and here today. So let's open it up. Anybody have, you can just raise your hand. Okay, Leah, go ahead.
By the way, it's Leah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say my reaction to Willie's talk about his childhood and upbringing and the DNA just totally rang true for me. And most recently, both my mom was in camps, including Auschwitz and others. My dad, they're both Polish, and my dad survived in hiding in the Polish farmland. And afterwards, they were in a kibbutz, displaced persons camp called Greifenberg near Landsberg. My mom became pregnant with me in that DP camp, and they decided when she was in her 8th month to leave Germany and go to Israel by boat, which was very risky. And so it occurred to me, I've been very interested in the post-traumatic generational transmission. And I realized that my DNA was being formed in Germany while my mom had just survived Theresen, Auschwitz, and a number of labor camps. The amount of fear and desire to survive, as well as love when she met my dad in the kibbutz, that was my beginning. And then I was born in Israel 2 months after they arrived. I became, I was a Sabra. And eventually, when I was 9, my parents immigrated to the United States. But the idea of being imprinted with body, emotions, thoughts, and, just it hit me as how I turned out as a second generation, passed it on to my children as third generations, and now there's a fourth generation. But my daughter, my eldest, took a long time. She's 52. Took her a long time to identify with the family's trauma, especially her grandfather, who she got to know. And then she got insights into my neuroses and why it was so hard for us to get along while she, I had her early. I was just 24, and I grew up with her. And my mom passed when I was 25. So there was a lot of loss and a lot of memory. I inherited my mother's guilty feelings of survival and pain. And that's about all I have to say. I just wanted to react to Willie.
Thank you for
well, thank you. Just to sort of highlight a lot of what you described is very familiar to me, not necessarily my own experience, but I talked a little bit about it in one of the interviews that I've been working on a book on intergenerational trauma. I've completed 100 interviews with second generation and third generation descendants. And a lot of what you said comes up with all kinds of different people. And I'm really looking forward to getting to the end of this writing process. I'm in the middle of it right now, because I think the world needs this book because it's not a clinical study, but rather oral history presented to me by generously by people who volunteered to be interviewed with me. So just to let you know, I'm not plugging the book as much as to say that I don't even have a book yet. So other than my memoir, but
You have a working
just to
title.
say that this is something that is coming down and coming down the road, and I hope to have it out by the end of 2026.
You have a working title, right?
Yes, I do. It's called. It should be called. It will probably be called The Hidden Victims, and it's an appropriate title because many people realize that Holocaust survivors have all been traumatized by their experience, but people don't understand in general. Even the descendants themselves don't totally understand that they've inherited some of that trauma, and how it manifests itself is quite interesting.
And Sammy, nice to have you with us. Congratulations on all the work you're doing. Speaking about the Holocaust, I know you're all over the place, and I'm glad to see you returning to our programming. And I'm happy that I can achieve these programs. They're a little different, as you know, is what they're now films with a Q&A at the end, and I hope you're enjoying those films. It's a pleasure and honor to put those together. So, Sammy, take the floor. You have the floor.
Yes, one of the things that impacted me, first of all, it's a wonderful programming. Kudos to everybody. But interestingly enough, it was mentioned, okay, that the Holocaust survivors, I think it was Willie's parents, that they compartmentalized, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct? Or was it Mark? Was it Mark?
I would say that some did, some did
Yes.
not. I mean, it's not one size fits all.
That
So
is correct, but
some dealt with it by compartmentalizing.
and
Others
guess
use
what?
other mechanisms.
And guess what? I do the same thing. So it's
Okay.
also, I've taken it from my parents. So that's why I just wanted to say that it's something happened to me and everything else.
Sammy, can you allow everyone, the audience, to know a little bit about you, what camps you were in, so people can have a better sense of who you are?
Certainly. Okay. So my parents and I were deported by the Romanians, okay, in 1941 to an area of former Soviet Union, which today is in Ukraine, and they annexed an area called Transnistria. So we were deported to a labor camp in Mogilев-Podolsk. For 63 years, I felt that I don't belong to the Holocaust survivors. Number one, because at that young age, I have no memories of that period of time, which for me is a blessing in disguise. I don't have to relive those horrors every single day. And until the Eichmann trial in 1961 in Israel, the Holocaust survivors wanted the children to have a normal childhood. And something happened in Washington, D.C. On November 1st and November 2nd of 2003. The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. closed its doors to the general public for 2 days. It opened it up only to the Holocaust survivors, their children, their liberators. And I decided to go, and there were over 8,000 people. And among them, when I sat at the table, there was one person born in the same city, been in the same camp, the same years, 1941, 1944. He was deported when he was 8 months old. I was deported when I was a year and a half. That was the first time that I felt I belonged to both generations, Holocaust survivor and child of Holocaust survivor. And in 2008, I had my first presentation to sixth graders. It was an interesting event, and that put me on the speaking bureau. What happened to me is that I, being so young and not having the skills or the strength to work, my luck was that I was never separated from my parents. At the same time, I was subjected to medical experiments, and I felt them and will feel them for the rest of my life, every single second, okay, because they could not find the cure in my particular case because I'm suffering from head, neck, shoulders, and back. Because of my age, I'm 85, I have other issues not related to it. So that was the second luck. And the third one is not far away from the camp. There was a farm owned by Germans. And when she saw the physical signs that I'm dying of starvation, big head, swollen stomach, swollen feet, at the risk of her entire family, she decided to give me milk. And when I was in Israel giving testimony in 2014, next to the Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, there is a garden honoring 27,000 people that saved Jews. Okay, and I saw a marker honoring the unknown righteous among the nations, and that made me very happy. Just wanted to also to say that I was for the first time on the March of the Living, and it was for the first time very, very important for me. But the other thing is that it was extremely painful for me. I have difficulty walking long distances, climbing stairs, and going on an incline, especially when we were in Israel. We had a lot of problems. The biggest problem that I really had was that I had an ingrown toenail. And they offered me a wheelchair, but I said no. And I did it for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to challenge myself. Okay, I know it sounds stupid, but but I decided to do it. But number two, I wanted to teach the young people a lesson. That is extremely difficult to put in words what people had to go through to survive. By seeing me struggling, determined to make it, hopefully they got a glimpse of, okay, what the people had to go through in the camps, or, to escape other dire consequences. And it was a lesson for them. So, yes, it was painful, but I'm glad that I did it. And there is also a book, and I'll finish, but there is also a book on Amazon called Humanity's Darkest Hour. And it's something for students. Every library should have it. Okay, and I'm also in that particular book. It's in with QR. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, I want to introduce you. Perhaps you can introduce yourself and a little bit about your background.
Just one thing. I just wanted to respond to Sammy that my mother was also in Transnistria, and she was in the Shagarat ghetto. She was a little older than you, but I can tell for those who don't know what Transnistria is like. not any different than a concentration camp, other than no gas chambers.
Right. And the other thing is, as far as the brutality of people, I would classify, first of all, the number one with the Ukrainians. They murdered 1.5 million Jews. They were the Poles, number two. And number three, very few people know, were the Romanians. As a matter of fact, the Romanian troops rounded up 19,000 Odessa Jews and burned them alive. So those were, in my opinion, the three biggest perpetrators as
hold
far
on.
as population.
All right, thanks, Sammy. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone, a little bit about your background, and then Devorah, I want to know if you want to unmute yourself and do the same. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for putting that program together. It was really very, interesting to listen to all the different people. I know Jeff because Jeff lives in an apartment building that's essentially across the park from my building. So it's always been a good thing to know together. I was born in France in '37. And I grew up in Paris during the occupation. So I suppose, objectively, I guess I could be considered a survivor, but certainly not in the sense of so many other stories that we hear today. Let's see, France was Paris was occupied from 31, no, I'm sorry, from 40 till 44, I guess 44. And the real survivor in that story really is my mother, and I could go through a lot of detail, but we have other people who want to speak. But anyways, the point is that towards the end of the occupation, that would be in late 43, early 44, my mother was afraid that she would be arrested and deported, like many other Jews in Paris were earlier. And so she decided to go into hiding, but she didn't want, just in case she would get caught, she didn't want me to be caught with her. So I ended up being hidden, or in actually, believe it or not, a Catholic boarding school for girls. I was not passed as a girl, I was passed as a nephew, or either the nephew or the son of the director, I don't remember. But anyway, so that's, that's in very general outline.
The mystery man walking
my story.
Of course, the background.
My family was affected by the Holocaust as well, because on my father's side, his entire family, he came from Poland, and his entire family died during the Holocaust. He had his parents, his sisters, and their children, their family. And on my mother's side, who came from Lithuania, and we heard a little bit of what happened in Lithuania early on. Her mother, my grandparents on my mother's side were also killed during the first Ukraine slaughter that happened, as well as they had about 9 children. So I think 4 of them survived, including my mother, but the rest didn't. But so anyway, so that is still with me. But anyway, that's essentially my background.
Devorah.
I did have a question before I let the next person speak. For Willie, I don't know if it's still there, Willie? Yeah, it's there. Your story was really interesting, and I had shared a lot of when I remember you mentioned when your wife sort of spotted you to write your first book, perhaps, and you felt, well, I'm not really a survivor. What kind of thing? In a way, I felt the same way, because I never considered myself as a survivor in the same sense that people who, even the rest of my family, grandparents, and people who were in different camps survived. But so I understand I understood this feeling very well. But I did have a specific question for you, Willie. You mentioned that you mentioned your father's first marriage and two daughters, and then eventually you mentioned that they died in Auschwitz. I assume maybe. Did you know for a fact from your father that they had gone to Auschwitz, that he had been deported to Auschwitz, or where did that information come from?
Well, my father was not ever in Auschwitz, but most of his family was sent there. My father, he was, and a couple of his brothers were of the age where they were just sent to labor camps. So he was in 7 labor camps. The only reason I know which camps that he was in is because I did research and found a couple documents. One of them was his application reparation payments, and it listed all the camps he was in. And so, the process of finding my father's Holocaust story was a 2-year process where I had to piece together different pieces of documents, plus whatever little anecdotes that he told me.
But then, my question also, you did mention, you thought, I don't know if you had that, you knew for a fact that his daughter from his first marriage had passed away, were killed in Auschwitz. Is that something that you found out by looking through documents, or?
Yeah, I knew that he had a wife and 2 daughters. I knew that they had perished, but he never told me when and where. He may have known. I'm not so sure. But as I started doing research, they lived in a town of Benzine. And as I started doing research, I knew when the major deportations were. And then I went to a cousin. I have a cousin who's 97, who's still alive and was in Auschwitz, and asked her which deportation they were included in, and she did remember. And so I could basically pinpoint when they perished. It was several days after that deportation.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, thank you for your interview comments, and thank you, Jeff, for setting this up.
And Devorah, is there anything that you want to contribute? And then I'm going to come over to you, Diana, and I want to hear about your mom, and then I'm going to go to you, Dana, after that.
So I just want to appreciate this group and the sharing.
Can you tell us a little bit for the audience, the recorded audience and our audience here, who you are, what your relationship is with the Shoah?
My family lived for 500 years in and around Prague, Czechoslovakia. My dad was a psychoanalyst, and he had an inkling that there might be trouble. He was pushed down the stairs in his home in Reichenberg, Czechoslovakia, which is part of the Sudetenland, the mountains that protect Czechoslovakia. So he switched to Prague. But when the Munich Agreement happened in 1938, October of 38, my dad became a German citizen since he had been born since the Germans took over Reichenberg, now called Librich, Czechoslovakia. Therefore, he had the opportunity to leave. Czech Jews were not considered at risk, but German Jews were. So he had this very short moment of being able to get out. And he had done the research to find the 14-year-old brother of my great-grandmother, who had been given a one-way ticket to America. And he somehow found this young boy, now man, to get the documentation. And therefore he escaped. He was the only, he and my mom left Czechoslovakia in January of 1939, which was just a few months before all of Czechoslovakia was lost. So I could have been a baby in the Holocaust. I was born 2 weeks after my grandparents were murdered. The roundup in Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, and Prague happened in 1942, which was the year I was born. So I have this image of There But for Fortune. Could have been I. And I have spent my life trying to understand and to cope with the survivor guilt that my mother felt. My mother actually had a nervous breakdown in 1945 when I was 3 years old. And she got the telegram from the one surviving cousin. And she realized that all her family had been murdered. Therefore, I did two things. One is Tikkun Olam. I needed to be part of the social justice movement and fix things and be a teacher. And the survivor guilt was sort of, I wore it on my sleeve. So I had to do something to be able to work with preschoolers. And I would wear a silly hat to sort of disguise. I was sort of a comedian as a teacher. Talking about compartmentalizing. I was, but the bigger thing is that I moved to Israel. I wanted to connect with the broken part of my story. And I met all kinds of Holocaust survivors on the kibbutz where I lived for 16 years, kibbutz Gesher Ziv. And more recently, I've been recording my story and other people's stories on this program called teachtheshoah.org, which is a virtual storytelling opportunity for those of us who have been traumatized under the shadow of the Holocaust. And I definitely am grateful, Jeffrey, for what you're doing and for what what we're all doing to somehow keep these memories alive.
And my sister says thank you and for coming today, and she sends you her regards. My sister is 4 years older than I am, and she is living in the same community with Devorah. So
yeah, she's the one who told me about you, and I'm grateful that I've been able to connect with you. Thank you.
okay, now Diana, maybe you can unmute. And Mark, I cannot believe how quiet you have been, so I'm going to get to you. Don't think I'm going to miss you. So
I'm here.
How's your mom? How's she feeling? And tell us a little bit about your mom. And you are the leader of the Shoah group in Oregon, I believe, right? Yep.
I started a second generation group in 2009 after realizing that I was also going through trauma, being a second generation of survivors and refugees. My mom is an author, Ruth Lindemann, and she's written 3 books. The best one is her biography, and I'm hoping she'll do her childhood as well. That would help me understand my childhood. The reason I started the second generation group is because it was for my own selfish therapy to reach out to other second gen that I knew must be feeling like I did, and why did I feel this way. Started out in one-on-one counseling, and intergenerational trauma is what we were all going through, departmentalizing everything and setting things on the back shelf. And all of a sudden, as I started this group, people would come out of the woodwork, people that I went to Sunday school with, or who never realized they were intergenerational trauma was going on. We didn't think about that when we were growing up. My parents talked a little bit about it. My dad refused to talk about his experience. They spent 10 years in Shanghai, packed in with the Chinese. And my mom left at 6 after Kristallnacht, and her book describes a lot of what she went through.
What is her book
So
title?
not even knowing.
What is her book? What is her book? Diana, what is her book title?
Oh, the last book? Oh my gosh. I remember the other ones. So there's
whatever. Just tell us one.
Sorry?
Just say any of them.
There's We Will Survive. We chose to survive, and then her last book. But her first 2 books are about the stories that a lot of the survivors told her. And she changed the names to protect the innocent, so to speak, because they were real stories. And she told me later that the people that actually told her, and they were the grandparents of the kids that I went to school with. So her books are We Chose Survival, They Will Not Be Forgotten, and To Survive Is Not Enough is her first book that she started in 2016.
And how old is Mom, and how is she doing?
92, and we're leaving Palm Springs on Wednesday to go to Seaside, Oregon, where it's much cooler because we're now in triple digits, and we won't return to Palm Springs. And actually, I'm buying a house in Portland so that we can go to Portland in case it's mean and nasty in Seaside. But anyway, I changed the name of the group to the Next Generations group because I found there were so many people that were traumatized by the Holocaust and by genocide that people were coming out of the woodwork. So it's not just about the second generation anymore. Some of the people that belong in our group are, it's like Clarice Wilsey. Her dad was a doctor at Dachau, and she didn't know it until after he died, and found the hundreds of letters that he wrote back to her mom describing what he was doing in the camp. So she joined our group, and we're a training ground for the next generation to speak. No criticism, come and practice, do your thing. We'll help you put it together. So now she's on the board at the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Education.
How many members are in your group?
Participants is anywhere, when we were in person, now we're going back to in person, was anywhere from 15 to 35 to 50, depending on what the subject was. But we did Zoom a lot, and people want to get back in person, so we're doing that. We have 12th, I think, is going to be both Zoom and in person. And there's I want to say there's about 1,500 on our email list. And they're not all Jewish, but they're all people who have gone through some kind of trauma. So we've been doing groups like this too with the Jewish Family Services. They got funding, so we got to have a therapy group on Zoom. They're trying to get another grant so that we can continue. But it's helped us realize that that's what we were doing. We had to compartmentalize stuff, and this is why we felt this way. And how come we were so different in school, you know?
An email from me, I have some ideas. But I want to go to Keith. If you can unmute yourself, Keith. I'm going to ask you a question.
Hey.
It's going to come from you out of the blue. So
okay.
You grew up with your grandparents, and you grew up with your dad. And we're talking a little bit here about trauma and intergenerational trauma. So do you see traits in you that you saw in your father and your grandparents?
Sorry, say that again, the last part?
Do you see intergenerational traits of trauma that you saw in your father and your grandparents?
Well, you know, I was thinking about it before, actually. My boyfriend's in the room with me right now listening to the whole thing, and my dad was a teacher.
Bring him in, because we can ask him.
No, he's good. He's over there. But I was thinking about my dad was a teacher for 33 years, and he was an absolutely insane teacher. And I was just asking my boyfriend, like, I wonder if dad had any kind of trauma and compartmentalization because he was just such a good teacher. And he used, I mean, you heard his presentation about his new book coming out. And it's always been like that for him. So I want to push that question. I don't feel like I personally have trauma, but I feel like the way that he raised me has raised me to be the person I am when it comes to my book, for example. I mean,
I want to follow. I want to follow up with you. Do you feel?
Okay.
Do you feel like you're anxious? That you're a helicopter? That you're scared of things that might come at you from nowhere? And Willie, maybe you can ask similar question of Keith that you, from your research, you could ask him a question that you have uncovered. Obviously, Keith is the third generation. I know your work is not really focused on third generation, but you certainly have a lot of trauma discovery in second generation, more than I would be as a, from the standpoint. So I'm curious.
Let me put it this way. I've always had against me my diversity issues. So obviously I'm half Jewish, I'm half Protestant, actually. My mom is Protestant. So it's never been something that I've worried about, really, but I know people on the outside do think about it. We'll put it this way: Hitler would consider me Jewish if he were around. So that part has always hung over me and made me think about that kind of thing. I'm also of the LGBT plus community, so I always have that I'm worried about. Walking down the street with my boyfriend holding his hand, it's always something I have to think about. I'm never anxious about it, but it's always in the back of my mind. And you never know. You never know what's going to happen. I remember as a kid, I don't even remember where it was, but I remembered hearing about somebody having a burning cross on their yard, on their front yard, and going, wow, that could happen to me, because it was a Jewish family that somebody put a burning cross in their yard. And so not really anxiety, but it's definitely always in the back of my mind, and it affects how I am, who I am.
So what question would you ask your father?
Do you feel that part of your crazy teaching was compartmentalizing, and did you ever have any kind of survivor's guilt, second generation?
First of all, I always felt my early life was such a mystery, Keith.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that my parents were Holocaust survivors from the LODZ ghetto, but I was always under the impression that that was like Anatevka and Fiddler on the Roof. And I didn't learn until I was 70 what the LODZ ghetto really was, which was a holding tank for Jews, set up by the Nazis for about 5 years. And as you showed this afternoon, Jeffrey, I mean, you had 250,000 Jews there, and 877 survived. My parents are not considered survivors of the LODZ ghetto. My mother's considered a survivor of Auschwitz, and she did pass on a certain amount of information to us. But honestly, they were struggling so much as immigrants in this country, and with a terrible marriage, that Willie, a lot of stuff you said is pretty much my story. What I knew about my parents was that if we went into a restaurant or to a bar mitzvah or to a wedding, all of a sudden my mother's purse would open up, aluminum foil would whip out.
Always.
And no matter how rich she was, the fish would go into the purse.
Oh my God.
The salt and pepper shakers went in there, the napkins, everything went into that purse.
Everything would go in, and it was always a mystery to me. None of my non-Jewish friends had this particular situation. And then if we had friends come to my house, including my girlfriends, we I'd be sitting there having my food, and you'd have your last pea on the plate or your last crust of bread, and my mother would say to me, "That's the last kruskala, and if you don't eat that, all the poor children of Europe are going to starve to death." Now, I thought this was normal behavior, and honestly, my parents were not like Willie's parents. Okay, they were not really what I would call loving. But they were struggling, and they were in a very difficult marriage. Keith never really got to know my parents, and of course, I didn't have any grandparents. Okay, I have to say that what I picked up in conversations with our greener friends, our immigrant friends, terrified the hell out of me. And so, why would I ask questions? I didn't want to know more. I will tell you one thing, though, Keith. When I was about a teenager, I always knew I was special because, first of all, I was one of the few Jews in my school. But second of all, I was the only one who had this Holocaust survivor behind me. And it made me very attractive to teenage girls. I was a mystery. And I would sit there writing poetry, and they would gravitate toward me. And that was about all I really understood about the specifics of my background. Like Willie, I didn't even know that my mother had five sisters and two brothers. And we would go to our friends' homes, and they would have hallways lined with family photographs. We didn't have any. And the only photographs we had were on the back of a few postcards. My parents weren't wealthy. They didn't bring anything with them to this country except basically one thing, and that was they believed there would be another Holocaust, and that the only way that we could survive would be to get a good education, make a lot of money, and they pushed us and pushed us and pushed us. And we protected Keith from that. And that's why he's the wonderful person he is. If I had trauma, I didn't want to pass it on to Keith. Because I will tell you, the best revenge against Hitler and all the anti-Semites is having a son like Keith, who is so caring and so loving, and who has done so well in school and everywhere else. And yes, I'm a very proud father.
Mark, I have a question. Mark.
You said I was quiet. I made up for it.
No, you're not going to be. I'm not finished with you yet. So,
oh, darn.
So I would love for you to share how you came upon the research, or what started the impetus of your writing your book. And I did play a clip from Mark's film, which we did together, called "The Way Out," the only way to work, about the LODZ ghetto. It is the largest viewed, I'm trying to say the word, has the largest viewership than any film we have. You're now over 2,100 views. Fabulous. So, but how you got to that book is how I want you to focus on.
Okay. I will try. Like Willie's mother, my mother made a tape for the Spielberg Foundation. And she gave me a copy, and I put it away, and I didn't look at it. Who wants to have nightmares? I didn't want to relive it, okay? And I feel guilty about that. Maybe that's my trauma, okay? Anyway, I finally did look at it, and I think, Keith, you were with me when we looked at it. No? Maybe Josh was. Anyway.
No, I haven't seen it yet. It's on the list of things to do, but we haven't done it yet. It's definitely something we need to do.
All right, we'll do it together. Anyway, there was most of the tape was something I already knew basically, but there was one sentence she said that really caught my attention, and she'd forgotten so much, which it was sad because I should have been the one interviewing her. Anyway, the one sentence that really caught my attention was, she said that when she was a teenage girl, she had worked she had worked in a factory, a warehouse. And in the warehouse, she was taught to run her hand over the clothing and report any valuables she found to her overseers. Well, after I heard that sentence, it just haunted me, because then I realized where the clothes were coming from. They were coming from Auschwitz and Helmno and all the death camps. And here was this young girl running her hand over the clothing. And it was my mother. And it just got to me. Anyway, I did a stupid thing. Okay, I entered a writing contest for a short story, and I wrote a story called The Warehouse. And when the judge sent me back the entry, it was one of the winners of the competition. There was a deadline, okay? And one of the judges wrote, "This is an amazing work of fiction." So I was very upset because I didn't consider it fiction. Anyway, for 2 years, I didn't show it to anybody that could possibly show it to my mom. And then finally, I showed it to my mother on a trip down to Miami. And my wife, said, "Don't do it." But I did. And I gave it to her. And by the time I got home, about 3 hours, 4 hours later, there was a message on my telephone. And the message was Maxilla. That's what she called me, because my real name in German was Max. She said, "Maxilla, I love your story, but I wish you'd asked me for the facts first." So what happened was I called my mother up and I said, "Ma, I'm going to come down next month and I'm going to come down and interview you, and I'm going to get the true story, and I'm going to write the story all over again." 2 days before we were supposed to go down to Miami, I got a phone call from my stepfather, who was a Holocaust survivor from Sosnowiec, which is a city in Poland, that Mom was in the hospital. So my wonderful wife and I raced down to Aventura, where Mom was in the hospital, and I got there 10 minutes too late. And I lost her story, and I lost my mom. And I never forgave myself for that. Well, shortly after that, I discovered a copy of the Chronicle of the LODZ Ghetto that Mom had given me years earlier. And it was this big monster book. And I sat down on the floor and I read it, and I was like shocked by the story, absolutely shocked by it. I had never heard of Rumkowski, who was the leader of the ghetto and who did everything possible to enforce German laws and decrees. He believed that the only way to save the ghetto was to make it a smooth-running factory for the German military. And as I read the book, I kept thinking to myself, my God, I've got to share with my children and grandchildren. But I said, I'm a children's book writer. I've never written anything like this. Well, I sat down at my computer and I wrote the book in about 30 days. And when I finished, I was absolutely emotionally drained. I couldn't believe it that I'd actually finished this thing. And then I gave it to a friend of mine who was a staunch Catholic, who was a professor of English. And I asked him to read it, because I was not going to share this book with anybody. And he called me up 11 o'clock at night, 2 nights later, and he said, "Mark, I could not put this down. This is an amazing accomplishment. You've got to have it published." But it was a long 3 years of research after that that convinced me finally to publish the book. And then what really happened was someone said to me, "The book is too big," So I cut the book in half and I fixed it up, and it ended up winning a number of awards, including the best historical fiction series and gold medal, this and that. And the most important thing was it started getting reviews that just brought tears to my eyes. And by finally writing this book and doing the research, I think, soothed my conscience a little bit that I had known so little about what my parents went through and how I lost my family. There are no tombstones. There are no grave markers. I guess the best thing I can say is that my son, Keith, and my other son, Josh, they're the real tribute to the family that we lost there. So, Willie, I want to thank you very much for your presentation because you captured so much of my feelings.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to ask Keith, and I'll get, there's people raising their hands, so that's great. But I want to ask Keith, when you hear your father speak like this, how does it impact you?
You know what? It amazes me because he's always been somebody who wants to help others. And even still, he retired, what was it, 30 years ago now?
25 years. Don't make me
25 years ago now? Okay. But he's never retired. He loves doing this kind of thing. And even, I mean, I won't give your age right now, but even at his age, he just loves to talk to people and share his story and see how he can help people. I mean, I get messages from people who are looking to publish a book, and he gives them hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of help with editing their books for free. He does whatever he can to help anybody with whatever they do, and it's great seeing him get that kind of, I don't want to say prestige, but the joy that he gets out of seeing what people write about his book.
I'll tell you one thing, okay? I was a 5th grade and a 6th grade teacher, and I've been retired 25 years, and I have 1,000 of my former 5th and 6th grade students on Facebook with me every single day. And yesterday, I was actually invited to the wedding of one of my students from 1970, her daughter. I mean, Keith's right. I was a crazy teacher and I loved it. And I love being with this group because I've learned so much. And Jeffrey, aren't you sorry you uncorked me?
No. Daniel, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, I want to ask Mark. I have 2 points. Well, one question and one point I want to make. You mentioned that when you talked about your mother and you wanting and you wanted to interview her. I did the same thing with my mother in maybe a few years before she passed away. I interviewed. I did the best that I could, and then was on tape, and I put the tape aside and never listened to them for a long time. And then eventually I did go back and listen to them. And you remember I told you before that I was hidden in that girls' school. And I realized by the time I listened to the tape, she had passed away. I realized I had never asked her what the name of the school was. So to this day, I know it's a Catholic school in Paris. I have no idea. We've tried everything to find out, and you don't know. So that's a sort of a lesson for other people who plan to do that kind of thing. Make sure, even after you finish the interview, go back and listen to it right away to make sure you haven't missed one thing like that, like I did. And I guess you had the same experience, right, from what you mentioned. The other question I had, since you were a teacher at probably about elementary school level, my son had an interesting experience that happened a few years ago. He was invited by a teacher that he knew in elementary school to tell the story of Hanukkah to the student. Most of the students were not Jewish. So he did that, and that went fine. And then after he asked, well, any question, one kid stood up and asked, is it true that the Jews killed Christ? And he was totally taken aback by that question. He didn't know how to say. Finally, when he said, well, go ask your teacher. And I think he left it at that. I mean, what could he have done in that situation? What would your suggestion be?
It's very difficult. One day I was getting my class online for lunch, and a little boy didn't know I was right next to him, and he said, "I hate Jews." Now, when he said that, I could have made a big issue out of it. I did not, and it actually appears in this new book that I'm working on. When someone asks a question like that, it's a good sign that they need education. And it's also a sign of what I was talking about before. You know, when you look at the group that we have here, we have the people who are already part of the choir. My son is the only one here who I can honestly say is not really part of the choir yet. He doesn't know everything you know. But maybe today he will have that kind of curiosity where he may say to me, "Hey, Dad, I want to see that tape of Grandma." Okay. My goal now is to reach beyond the choir. And that's what I've been talking to Jeffrey about. It's great that we're here, but where are the young people? And where's that little boy who said, what I find so painful when someone says that? We think people still don't believe that. They still do in some cases. And that's the point. And if we handle what I think has to happen is the Holocaust has to be taken out of its isolation, and it has to be put in the same curriculum as every other example of hate. And in case of like my son's book, My TIO'S Pulse, it's about the Pulse nightclub, but it's about so much more. Okay? It's not just about one incident. And that's the problem. We in this group, and I love this group, don't get the wrong idea, but we're the choir. The real question has to be, how do we reach past that choir? How do we increase the number of people who learn what we already are committed to?
All right. Thanks, Mark. Hello, Ava. It's nice to see you. And I wish you would unmute so I could say hello and I could hear you. And if you have anything you want to contribute, and then Dana, you have the last word for tonight. And
can I just throw one thing in, Jeff? I just wanted to thank you all for letting me talk about the Pulse tragedy as well, because it is Pride Month starting today, and it's the 9-year anniversary of Pulse coming up on June 12th. So thank you for letting me talk about that as well.
We just had the Pride Parade right outside of my apartment building.
Yeah.
Mine
too.
Yes, we live across the park. And I was so worried, actually, that there was going to be so much noise that I'd have to find another place to have this, to sit and have this meeting. So congratulations on Pride today. And we're happy to have you as an included in our group, and Keith, as well as anybody else who is falling into the LGBTQ group. And so that's terrific. So Ava, you need to unmute yourself. So I love that you were able to join us. I know it was intermittent, but I hope you'll get a chance to look at the recording a film that I've made. So say hello to you and to your family. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much. I had a video off because I'm preparing for tonight is Erev Shavuot, and I have the family coming for dinner, so I'm so busy. So I've been listening, but in the kitchen.
Wait, you got to tell us the menu.
Oh, I'm making French onion soup and a kugel with cheese, ricotta, and other stuff. And what am I making? And I'm making salmon, and I'm making a European that is very popular both in Hungary and in Czechoslovakia. Noodles. I sauteed cabbage with onions. So some noodles will be cabbage noodles. Then will be noodles with poppy seed. I love poppy seed. And my husband.
My aluminum foil.
Pardon me?
I wish I had aluminum foil.
Oh, to take some. Yes.
I'm coming to your house for supper.
You're welcome to come. And what am I making? I just happened to get sorrel, which is so popular in Europe. I don't know if anybody knows, but I made a sorrel is like the sorrel leaves are similar to spinach leaves, but they are sour like lemon. And I made my mom's like a side dish next to.
Okay, you got to stop here because you're missing the most important part of the meal. Okay, so
Which one? Which one?
Your mom has an incredible story. So I want you to tell the audience exactly what the story is as quickly as you can. But you have to tell us what you're making for dessert because that is the first thing I would eat.
Oh, you will be disappointed, Jeffrey, because I'm not making tonight my mom's desserts. I do all the time, but not tonight. My husband is a Sephardic Jew. So tonight for Shavuot, I made something that's called kanafe. It's a shredded dough.
Yeah, I know it well.
And okay, so inside is one is with cheese and the other one is with pistachio filling. So that's the dessert.
You ship FedEx?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. And I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank all of you, Mark and Keith and Willie and just every one of you and Jeffrey, because I cannot, this is so important to me to be part of this group. And I feel so much like so many of you. I grew up without grandparents and I was always traumatized by their story, but I never really showed it to them because my parents always spoke about their experiences, but to their friends. And they thought that I, as a young child, I'm playing in the background because I was playing with my doll, but I was listening. And I grew up without grandparents, like many of you. And like Willie, I think Willie mentioned that your father had a nervous breakdown. Was it Willie? Yes?
No, he did not. He did not have a nervous breakdown. However, if you pressed him to talk about his experience, he would
cry.
He would just
Yes.
start to cry. Yeah.
Yes, and my father did too. My mother was able to talk about it. My father didn't because my father lost his wife and his 3-year-old daughter. They were murdered in Auschwitz.
It's the same.
So he couldn't
Yeah.
talk about it. But my father, because what happened, my parents remained in Czechoslovakia. Well, my parents met after World War II, and they married a few years after the war, and Czechoslovakia became communist. And again, the second time, things were taken away from them. And my father had a nervous breakdown at that point. Thank God he recovered. He was okay. And I grew up with wonderful, loving parents. But October 7, 2023 has been very, very difficult for me. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way. Extremely difficult. And I have been going through a very difficult time because of that. I always said whenever I did presentation based on the book that I published in 2019, I always ended never again. And
what is your book title so everyone can know?
I actually have it near me. It's called Hidden Recipes. It's a Holocaust memoir of my parents. And my mother was in Auschwitz, and she and her 16-year-old sister survived Auschwitz. They were sent to a munition factory in Germany, and there she was a translator and messenger, and she was able to pilfer paper and a small pencil and write recipes during evenings back in the barracks. And she wrote hundreds and hundreds of recipes because women were starving, so they constantly talked about food. Food was on their mind. So I shared the story of my mother but also I included my father's story, my father was in the Hungarian slave labor. And while he was away, his wife and 3-year-old daughter, his parents, his nieces, nephews were taken and murdered in Auschwitz.
Okay, well, thank you, Ava. It's so good to see you. I want to be at your dinner. How many people are you having for dinner tonight?
We are 13, total of 13.
And Dana probably has some interesting recipes for you. So Dana, I want to thank all of you for being here. It's been a very difficult 2024 and 2025 for me. Those of you who know, I have been diagnosed with leukemia, and unfortunately, this blood disease is also affecting my central nervous system. But it is absolutely a delight to create these films, to bring you all together, to have like a little havara that we can talk about things. My films and the amount of people who are interested in telling their stories is growing all the time, and isn't a week goes by that someone doesn't ask if I could record their stories. So I'm advocating that anybody who wants to have their story recorded, I can't promise that I can, but I want you to contact me and we'll discuss it. These films are really incredible and important to me. Willie has sat down for 2 interviews with me, and you didn't see that yet because that's a future project. Also, Willie and his daughter is coming together for something that I really found to be my next kind of project, which is called the Door of a Door series, which I bring the whole family together to discuss what it's like to grow up in a survivor's home. And anybody who is interested in participating in a Door of a Door series with their siblings, with their children of appropriate age, please contact me. I'm really looking for those type of films to come out. And now I'm going to turn it over to my buddy, Dana. Dana has been such a dear friend. She has helped us in so many ways with her psychologist talent. And whether it was talking about intergenerational survivor trauma, which we did a series of 4 programs called Into the Light, along with several programs that she attended after October 7th, and gave her wisdom and counsels and tools to people all over the world, hundreds of people who came into those Zooms. But Dana is actually now choosing to be an Uber entrepreneur. And she's decided to take her cooking skills. She runs the largest Facebook Jewish cooking group called Jewish Cooking, and another group, you'll fill the details in. But she's also, as you saw in the film, she's creating, and I was just pleasure to help Dana publicize her new career as sort of the Dear Phil, that shows that she's becoming the female version of Phil. Phil from Everybody Loves Raymond, and Feed Me Phil, the series on Netflix. So Dana, take it away. Why don't you explain what you're doing about Jewish history in Puglia, Italy? So go ahead.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's so wonderful to be here today with everybody. And Jeffrey, thank you for bringing us all together. I know Mark calls us the choir, but sometimes, and he's absolutely correct, but sometimes it's just so heartwarming to sit with the choir and share our stories and really talk to and listen to people who have similar experiences and really understand. And, my heart is really touched and really full. And I have to say, I've been raw since yesterday with the news of the vandalism in Paris on Jewish sites. And I'm actually about to be there and tour that area and spend the day with a Jewish tour guide there. So it's really freaking me out as well. So I like to travel. Also, I guess one quick thing I just want to add is I'm about to host my cousins here shortly in like an hour or two. We're coming together and talking about our family history and trying to piece together what all the different branches of family know about the family history. So that's like also sort of, I don't know, weighing on me and filling my heart. But it's going to be amazing to connect in person. So I don't have time for more details of that because we've been here a long time. But I just want to say that when I travel, I always look to see, what is or has been the Jewish experience in an area. And pre-COVID, when I went to southern Italy, I was struck at how many times I encountered little traces and clues and footsteps of Jews who lived in Italy many centuries ago. And it really struck me that Jews lived there in much bigger numbers than today, over 500 years ago, but they were there for 1,500 years. And how did I visit Italy all these times and like barely picked up on this thread? I mean, sure, there's ghettos here and there, and I've been to a lot of them, but I just really didn't understand the extent of the history of the Jews who lived in Italy until I started picking up on this thread on that one trip. So I don't know. Another sort of theme I just want to quickly share with you guys, or sort of put forward, is this idea of Jewish pride and Jewish connection and Jewish joy. And so, and that, you know, we need to like tap into that and experience that too. And I think that is the anecdote, you know, to a lot of the pain and the trauma and the hidden background anxiety that a lot of us carry. So I've organized this trip to Italy. It's the first week of September. I'll give you my contact information if you or anybody you know is interested, but I'm going to take people to follow in these footsteps in southern Italy, so I can share what I know, not only about the history, but also the food. And we're going to be based at a cooking school in Puglia in a town called Lecce, which has a Jewish museum and an excavated mikveh. And the trip is really culinary centered and all about the food, the Jewish food in the different regions of southern Italy. So, and Jeffrey interviewed me and made a film, and it was really fun to meet together. And Jeffrey's kind of like my brother. We fought via email in doing the editing of this film, you know, like in a sort of like a lighthearted way, but it's just really nice when you have a deep friendship and you can just really like be open and honest and real and still love each other. So thank you, Jeffrey.
I told my faux sister to get out of the way, so I just decided that she's just being obsessive in the film editing. So I took it on myself to create a 30-minute film, which is launching literally on Monday. It's called The Awaiting Table. I would love for you to just listen to it because it's quite interesting to learn about the Jewish history of southern Italy. It is more than just food, but there is certainly a food component, and you know, I think you will enjoy it. Also, Barbara Russell's Closet will launch on June 2nd, which is the book Ruta's Closet, written by Keith Morgan from Canada. Keith was introduced to me by Esther Gilbert, who's the widow of Sir Martin Gilbert. And so my connections from my network sort of weaves itself all around the world, and amazing stories come to me. So I want to thank you all for participating. I'm honored to have your friendship. I will try to do this again, whether it's next month or the month after. I have to make sure I protect myself from a health perspective, but it's great to have you all with us, and thank you for joining us. So have a nice afternoon, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.